Welcome, everyone, to our LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host for this program. I'm going to do a little introduction. I'm going to choose our guests here, and then we're going to get into things. So our topic today, why your personal brand matters more than ever. Interesting topic. I think we've got some interesting guests here. We're going to explore this. Personal branding, such an important and really kind of new thing, I think, for a lot of people. It used to be just these big influencers and everything. And now, right, basically any leader inside business has the opportunity to develop a personal brand and ask really interesting strategies and outcomes of that. So we're going to talk about all that. Before we dig into it, however, a couple of instructions. If you're on LinkedIn and you want to ask a question or leave a comment, go ahead and put that in the comments on LinkedIn. We will see those. We'll try to work with those in as we're talking. We're also streaming on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, go over to LinkedIn to leave comments. I'm not going to be watching the YouTube stream. If you're watching the replay, either on LinkedIn or YouTube, go ahead and leave comments there as well. We will check both the YouTube and the LinkedIn page and catch comments and questions and stuff. So we'll be watching in the coming days and weeks. So feel free to leave those there, even if you're watching the restream. So with all that, let's get into the program. Let's introduce our guest. First up, Ari Weinstein. He is a seasoned startup advisor. He's a fractional executive. He helps entrepreneurs scale their companies, prepare for high-value exit, brings expertise in strategy, growth, and coaching. Ari, welcome to the program.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Next up, Zach Messler. He is a messaging and positioning expert. He works with leaders to uncover what truly sets them apart, and he helps founders and teams find the words to say what they do and why it matters, or why what they do matters, clearly and powerfully. I'm excited for this. Zach, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Glad to be here. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. So let's just get into it. I want to start with just a kind of a grounding question here, kind of a context question. When we use the words personal branding, what are we talking about? How you define it? Like, what does this mean? I think that, it floats around in lots of different ways, but I'd love to kind of get your kind of individual takes, or when you're talking about it, what does it mean for you? Zach, why don't we hear from you first?
So I actually hate the term personal branding. I think it's terrible. I wrote about that, in fact, today, because what is it really? What are we talking about? We're talking about positioning. How do we want to show up in the minds of whatever audience? As a founder, you have so many different audiences. You have your internal audience in your company, you have your investors, you have your market. How do you want to show up in the minds of those people? That's really what it means. And then how do you go about doing it? Yeah. That to me is what it is. And that to me is really product marketing, but you can't really call it personal product marketing. So personal brand it is.
Yeah, I love it. Ari, let's hear from you. How do you take this, or how do you define this world?
Well, Bruce, I love that Zach is taking the personal out of it, because that's what I did in my book. Even though my book is titled Personal Branding at Work, in my book, I gave a definition of branding that applies to all types of branding, personal or commercial. Branding is the impression you make on others, period.
Yeah.
It's the impression you make on others. Now, that's the noun. It's also a verb. Mm-hmm. And this is where I think the term personal branding is useful as a verb. It means taking control of your brand, being intentional with the impression that you personally make on people. And Zach already mentioned all the stakeholders, so I don't have to repeat that.
Yeah, no, I think the stakeholders are good. I like this idea of, that's both a verb and a noun. The other one, the thing I kind of add to it is this idea of, what do you want to be known for, or what's that difference that you're trying to evoke, right? Because you're going to have a reputation. The question is, what part of that what I'm always looking at is what part of that reputation is designed to kind of set you apart from either the other people in the space. I don't want to say competitors, but other people in your space. I'm always focused on how do you become unique and different, right? And so, like, what is that? What is that thing? What is that uniqueness and differences that you can put into the way that you're showing up? And I always love the idea. It's like everyone has a brand, whether you know it or not, right? Like everyone has an impression, and it's how much are you intentional about it, and are you strategic about it? That I think comes into this conversation, and for what purpose, right? A lot of this I think comes back to why. Like, why have a personal brand? What are you going to do with it? Like, what's the outcome that you're looking for, or the results? So let's dig into that. In terms of personal branding, when we think of personal branding, I think a lot of people focus on celebrities and people that are famous of some sorts. Let's kind of bring it down to a little bit more of the business world. Like when you think about people that should have or should care about or should put effort into their personal brand, what kind of people are we talking about in the business world? Ari, why don't we kind of start with you and then we'll hear from Zach. Like
Oh, sure.
Who are you focused on?
Well, as you mentioned in introducing me earlier, I've advised all kinds of startups, and I continue to do so as a volunteer with SCORE.
Yeah.
And really, I think it's very important for founders, because founders, at least temporarily until they start hiring, are the face of the brand.
Mm-hmm.
It's them. And, people, especially in my experience, especially investors and potential partners, they're judging you personally.
Yeah.
They're making a personal decision of whether to spend any time with you whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So your personal brand, I would argue in that case, especially in the case of founders and startups, actually is at the leading edge of your engagement with very, very important partners. So that's who, to answer your question, that's who I think it's for.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that you made a very good point in asking the question, why have a personal brand? Yeah. So that you can communicate your values. Your values are basically packaged up in your brand, and people make decisions to engage with other people based on shared values. Mm-hmm. So that would be my argument.
I like it. Zach, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I know often you can't really say this sort of thing. I think it's for everybody. I really do. I think it's for everybody. Founders, for sure. It has, especially early stage founders, mm-hmm. It has a much larger impact for when it's done well. But think of job seekers. Think of anyone who's looking for a new opportunity or might be looking for a new opportunity in the future. How do you want to show up?
Yeah.
If I go, I spent 20 years in product marketing for enterprise tech, and I ran teams and built teams and that sort of thing. And when you're hiring, often you have multiple people you think are good for the role. So what's it going to be? You go look at a LinkedIn profile, or you go do a quick search on someone, and you're blown away by what you see, versus you have a LinkedIn profile or a background that looks just like the resume, just like it's the same idea. So it's really, a personal brand to me is really for anyone who sees the potential to stand out for good reason. That's really it.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you're working with folks on personal brands, how do you kind of balance the, we want to develop something, like we want to be focused, we want to curate, we want to highlight certain things, but also we don't want to be things we're really not. Like we don't want to be aspirational, or we don't want to be inauthentic. Like, how do you balance this kind of, I want to curate, right? Like I want to develop certain things to kind of focus and highlight, but I don't want to slip into this kind of mode of like trying to be something I'm really not. Like how do you balance that, or how do you approach that? Either one of you, whoever feels the most, they want to jump in on that one.
So to me, this is why I said product marketing earlier in this conversation.
Yeah.
It's, you think of product marketing, really could even be just general branding. You always have these brand pillars, mm-hmm. these message pillars or positioning pillars. Those pillars are what you want to stand for. And as a person, so personal brand, they have to be real. They have to be real. And part of the way that I like to pull that out is, what do you hear all the time from people? One of the things I hear all the time is, oh my gosh, dude, you have such a positive, infectious energy.
Yeah.
And so when I was thinking about what do I want to be known for, you'll see the emoji after my name. I use a hashtag boom shakalaka. My logo is a freaking lightning bolt as a Z. It's all that. It's that energy. It's the positivity. I show up that way. I can't help it. And that, to me, that's the best way to cultivate a personal brand. You just magnify the things you already do naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll take that a step further. That's a great foundation. And one of the things branding coaches like me do with our clients is get them comfortable with repeating themselves.
Yeah.
Because, well, okay, I've defined my brand. I have my message. I worked with Zach, if I'm lucky, or with you, Bruce. And so I'm clear about the message, but I keep saying the same thing. No, that's okay. You want to get comfortable with that, because if you start inventing new things, that's where you risk slipping into inauthenticity.
Yeah.
So getting comfortable with repeating yourself, getting comfortable with, basically playing your own drum to that repeated tune, that helps you stay on target, stay on message, and continually present an authentic personal brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things on that I see all the time with founders, right? All the time. I'm so sick of this. I'm sick of this message. Can we change it? I'm sick of this.
Right.
When you're sick of a message, and this goes whether it's for your personal brand, for you and how you show up, or even your product, when you're sick of a message, but it's working, when you're sick of it, that's when people are just starting to notice it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the hardest things. Like, for the person, yeah, it becomes so repetitive and so like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm talking about this all the time, But for the audience, right, they're just picking up pieces of this, right, and it takes, they may only hear you like 5% of the time you're saying it. So to actually have that impact for you, it feels overly saturated. For them, it's just starting to register, and it's just hard to kind of bridge that difference because it can feel very repetitive.
I'm happy to say that that's a great principle that Zach just shared, and I can confirm a source for it. Milton Glaser, famous graphic designer who designed the I Love New York logo. That's what he's most known for. I met him in person, got trained by him for a day, and because we were working on one of his brands, and he said, you as a designer or the owner of a brand will get tired with it much, much faster than the public. Don't get tired of your brand. You have to leave it out there for it to work.
Yeah. And let's talk about what goes into a brand, particularly a personal brand, right? Because I think it's one thing to talk about the strategy and like the messages and positioning, all this, but how it actually shows up, right? For a personal brand, like what are the elements that you think of when you're coming up with, kind of a personal brand strategy? What are the pieces that actually communicate that brand? Like what is in that kind of portfolio? Zach, why don't we hear from you on this one?
Yeah. So again, I take a product marketing approach to all of this stuff. So first it's the positioning angle. How do we want to show up? How do we want to show up in the mind of our buyer? After that, it's getting to, this is exactly the method that I used to use in tech, on how do I get to the essence of a product? Well, in personal branding, the product is you. You're the product. So I use the same kind of methodology, which is we just answer 3 questions together. What is it? So if we're talking about you, what are you? Who are you? What do you do? So who are you? What do you do? And why do you matter? Why does what you do matter?
Yeah. In
doing that, we end up with a narrative that ties back to why you do what you do, and why the people, anyone who should care about this thing, will care about this thing. Now that we have that structure, now it's easy to take it and think of all the different ways that how do we get this message out? How do we put this front and center so that anytime I do something, this is bubbling up and this is showing up? From a tactical standpoint, there's a whole ton of slew of stuff that,
Well, I think that, and I think that's where a lot of people don't realize how subtle this is. I mean, people think about, okay, well, how does my website look or something like that? But it's even down to like the clothes you wear, how you cut your hair, right? Like your email signature is right. Like, yeah, exactly. The backgrounds, right? Like it's so subtle. Like the fact, putting emojis on your title or on your name, right?
So here's a perfect example of that, right? So I started on a dare. I started using Boom Shakalaka on a dare. And it just fit. It goes back to, when I was running a team, I used to have my last team, I had a bunch of super young content marketers. And I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s. And, I used to say Boom Shakalaka all the time. It goes back to street hockey on the mean streets of Cherry Hill, New Jersey. You do something cool and Boom Shakalaka. Well, my team would do something, someone on the team would do something awesome and be like, boom, shakalaka, high five, let's go. And so one of the women on my team dared me to write an article on LinkedIn. This is back in 2015 or so.
Yeah.
Dared me to write an article on LinkedIn about Boom Shakalaka. Okay. And then she dared me to incorporate it into my LinkedIn profile. Okay. The next logical step was a hashtag. I've been using the Boom Shakalaka hashtag on LinkedIn for everything and anything I do for 8 or 9 years now. And today, this happens all the time. Today, someone I kind of know, but I know through LinkedIn, did a post. And she said she had the picture of the Boom Chakalaka, the bird. And it was a post about Boom Shakalaka and me. That's the thing that showed up. And she said, I couldn't remember this guy's name, but I remembered Boom Shakalaka. And that's the perfect example. I've taken Boom Shakalaka. It's a pillar. The pillar isn't exactly Boom Shakalaka, but it's that infectious energy and celebration. That's one of the pillars. And I've made that something real that I can put out into the world. And like I said, it's on. If you search that hashtag, I mean, here I spell it. I spell it a little goofy because I always have. But it's phonetic. But if you search that hashtag Boom Shakalaka, you'll see all of my posts. You'll see all of it. And people contact me when they see Ben and Jerry's Boom Chakalaka or Boom Chicka Pop. So it's that's the type of thing. It's subtle. Well, Boom Shakalaka is not subtle at all, but using that everywhere, you don't even.
What's the vocabulary? I mean, I think it's not just visual; it's the words that you use. I like this idea of a hashtag, right? This language, tone, right? I mean, if you're writing a lot, like it weaves into all that stuff, right? Like how do you actually create content, all those kind of things. All right, what's your, like, when you think about the actual mechanisms by which you deliver a personal brand, what comes up for you?
Well, you asked a good question about that. And I love that Zach gave one particular brand asset as an example of that's a key asset. So I think of personal branding the way I think of commercial branding. I did commercial branding for 37 years, including for one of the most influential financial services companies on the planet. And the elements, there's visuals, there's verbal, and this is a little bit of a different take on what the elements are. So visuals, verbal, images, taglines, colors, fonts, and all those, to me, those are all the elements, which together make up a brand system. And they form your brand identity. Just as our identity has different parts to it, your brand has different parts to it. Together, they communicate what Zach is about. Boom Shakalaka is one key element. It's a strong element. But you and I both, all three of us, know very big companies that don't necessarily have something catchy or sexy, but they're still well known because of their consistent communication and application of their brand. Think of Apple. They don't currently have a tagline. Right? It's just Apple. But they're consistent enough in their presentation of their brand identity and those assets that they use, the fonts they use, the style they use in their video commercials and at their events, the colors. It's consistent, so it's memorable. We look at something and go, oh, that's Apple, right? And we look at Boom Shakalaka and go, oh, that's Zach. So not to be too self-serving here, but if you consult with a professional like me, this is what you're asking them for, to put together a system for you, a branding system that used together forms your brand identity. And the system is both the identity and the instructions on how to use it.
The application. And how, I mean, if a leader, an executive leader is looking to kind of start to develop a personal brand, but doesn't necessarily want to hire a consultant or, drop a whole bunch of money on developing a whole system. Like, what are some of the things they can think of about what they do on a regular basis that can start to create some consistency in that stuff? What do you see or what do you look for?
That's an excellent question. Zach, did you want to take that one first?
Chomping here.
I do have an answer.
That's really funny. I think it for me, it shows up. It starts with how do I want? it's looking inward first.
Mm-hmm.
How do I want to show up?
Yeah.
Yep.
How do I want to show up? And part of it is as simple as just defining out whether that's who you are right now or not. How do I want to show up? And then start showing up that way.
Yeah.
That's
in my
really
book. Sorry to interrupt you, Zach, but that exact guidance is in my book. It's not even in chapter 1. It's right in the introduction. It starts with asking yourself a question: what do I most want people to know about me?
Yeah.
The people whom I want to engage, whether they're, no matter which stakeholder group they belong to. Zach aptly listed them earlier, right? Investors, clients, employees, partners, right? And customers, of course.
Yeah.
But what do you most want people to know about you? And it starts with looking inwards. My brand development process, to answer your question, Bruce, for founders who don't want to spend money, look for a framework. I have a framework. It's called the 5D method. So it's 5 steps that all start with D to discovering and developing your personal brand.
Yeah.
So there are frameworks. And starting the way Zach advised you is exactly the right way. He and I are in agreement about that.
Yeah. The interesting one, the one twist that I found about it, and this happened to me personally, and then it's definitely with some of the folks I've worked with, is there's this kind of audit of like, who am I? Right. And sometimes you don't realize, like, you don't think about all the things that you do and you are and parts of your life and things like that. So there's a little bit of an audit. But then there was this kind of part for me is like, well, what's actually interesting to other people? And like 2 things came up for me is I do all this kind of crazy outdoor adventure stuff. I've climbed all over the world. I've been in the Himalayas and things like that. And I had never talked about that in professional settings. And when I was kind of working with somebody and I was telling them, they were like, oh my God, why are you not putting this stuff online? I mean, this is like who you are, right? I'm like, I don't know. I never thought about it like that. I just do those things. It's not. And so and the other one was I do all this men's work, right? So for the last decade or so, I've worked in all these different kind of men's programs and worked with men around building community and things like that. And it's kind of related to some of the coaching work I do, but it's pretty cleaved off. And I started talking about some of that stuff, and they're like, why are you not talking about this in your messaging, in your social and things like that? Because it's, and I realized it was, I didn't appreciate that. Oh yeah, these are things that I do, but also that it's actually interesting to folks, and it's interesting in a way that it does kind of explain who I am and how I work. And there's a lot of people, once they kind of realize, they're like, oh, now it makes sense. It's the pieces to the puzzle of getting to know me and kind of why I do what I do. And it does influence a lot of the other professional things that I do. So I think there's this interesting thing of how do you get feedback, or how do you get, feedback from people about what's interesting and then start to hone it. I think, Zach, you kind of alluded to it as well. It's like listen to people, but are there strategies, or who would you talk to? Who would you get feedback from that would help you start to identify those things that maybe this is stuff that people are interested in that I need to work into my brand?
Part of it to me is just, you have to have a lot of guts to do this the right way. And you have to be willing to put yourself out there and try different things.
Yeah.
And for me, it's less going and asking people, hey, what do you think of this? And just freaking doing it and seeing what happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a marketer by trade. The worst thing that happens in marketing is nothing. Literally nothing. That is the worst thing that happens. But what you're talking about, you probably see a bunch of whiskey over my shoulder. Mm-hmm. It's a passion of mine, I guess you could say. I'm an enthusiast. I went on a bourbon trail tour with my daughter a few weeks ago. I was posting about it on LinkedIn, tying it back to what I do. And what did we end up with? The boom shakalaka.
Nice. I love it.
So whiskey, though, I was having a conversation with a guy, a LinkedIn influencer, Richard Moore. I don't know if you know Richard Moore.
No,
so he's a sales guy. He's pretty good stuff. Hi, Richard. So it's pre-COVID. I was at an event and met him in Las Vegas, and there's this great whiskey bar there. And I'm sharing some whiskey and some stories with him. And he said, I can't do he's a brilliant English and British accent. And he said, Zach, you have to incorporate the whiskey, my man. You have to incorporate it somehow.
Yeah.
And that started the Friday Toast. I do a Friday Toast here on LinkedIn every week, where you guys will probably be in it this week.
Yeah, I love it.
Where I call out the people who've had a positive difference on my week, and I raise a rare or otherwise delicious whiskey in their honor. that whiskey post, that Friday toast, which has nothing to do with my business, has brought me business.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I have people contacting me, asking me my opinions on whiskeys. That turns into business conversations. It's wild.
Yeah.
So the things that you might not think will resonate with people might resonate with people, but you won't know until you try it. And it's different trying it than it is asking someone, hey, would this resonate with you?
Yeah.
People aren't honest.
And I'd like to add a thought to what you both said, because I'd like to point out that each of you told a story about having something that's authentic and personal to you that you care about. For you, it's mountaineering, Bruce. For you, Zach, it's whiskey. And neither of you thought to incorporate that as part of your personal brand. You had to be prompted. And in the case of Boom Shakalaka, Zach, you said you only did that on a dare. So someone said, well, why don't you put that out there? So the things that we don't think should be shared actually are of great interest to a great many people. And we just don't think of them as, oh, that's my thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I go hiking and taking photos, right? Here, right? I always have a camera literally like within arm's reach.
I love it.
Now I incorporate that into my brand. So I agree with Zach. Take a chance and also listen to your coaches and mentors, because it turns out the things that you're proud of, that you love doing, you're proud of those things and you love doing them because you value them. And again, the most effective brands share their values.
Yeah.
So go for it.
Yeah, I love it. Sort of last question that I wanted to dig into while we have time here is, so I end up working with all these founders who are kind of thinking or preparing for exits or going through exits. And one of the things I generally recommend to them prior to, a couple of years before they get to a transaction is start developing a personal brand, because I think that's one of the really important assets they can develop as they're selling their company, for two reasons. One, from a market point of view, it gives them a platform to be able to do something else and stuff. But I think from a personal point of view, it helps differentiate themselves from the company. And I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of entrepreneurs have going through an exit is existential crisis. Their ego is so caught up in the company and they sell it. And then they're like, who am I? How do you kind of help a leader, a founder particularly, with developing a brand when they're also sort of so intricately tied with the company? How do you start to tease this apart? Is there any strategies or kind of techniques or philosophies that you have? All right.
I'd like to take that one first, because I've advised clients on exactly this scenario. So what I did with my branding expertise is I turned that into a coaching practice where I coach founders, executives, and I've coached exits too. And what I ask them to think about is, what are the things that you would be doing if you weren't working, on your company 25 hours a day, right? What are those things? And it turns out most of them, because of their interactions with other founders and with other movers and shakers in the world, they are on boards or they have been asked to partake as advisors. So they can start thinking about what are these other causes and other things that you care about, that if you didn't have your company, if your company were in good hands. So just do a thought experiment. Imagine that that you've already exited. Yeah. It's 2 years from now. Your company's in great hands, is doing as well or better than when you were leading it. What are you doing now? So that's a great starting point, is think about those. And they'll start, oh, I last year I came across this one person at a conference and I haven't stopped thinking about, oh, well, what does he do? Well, he does this, he has this foundation. And I'm like, okay. Let's develop a board resume. And by the way, that's a unique type of document that we can develop for people who are looking to join boards, that has a lot of personal branding on it.
Yeah.
So again, use an actual tool like a board resume and say, what would this board resume look like if it were about you? Forget your company, because you're a founder, but you've exited. So that's just now a bullet point on that resume. What else is on there?
Yeah.
How else do you bring value to the world?
Yeah,
that reminds me of a positioning exercise in product marketing. Now, this is not personal branding. This is product marketing. We're talking about, in my case, technology here. But when you're going through positioning and you want to try and figure out, competitive positioning, you have to understand all of the options out there, all the competing options out there. So the question we always ask is, if our audience, our buyers, our customers were not, if we did not exist, if our product did not exist, what would they be doing? And it's totally related to what you're saying, Ari. And it's that's a fantastic positioning exercise, whether you're selling a product, whether you're selling yourself. If your company now, you sold it, it exited, what if it didn't exist?
Yeah.
What would you be doing? That's essentially what you're saying. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're at time here.
The parallels between marketing a product and marketing yourself are they're perfect.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean,
agree.
it's positioning, right? It's like figuring it out. It's just you're dealing with a different product, right? You're dealing with a person rather than a box or a technology.
Yep.
I'm sure we could do another hour on this, but we're going to hit time here. I want to make sure people have contact information. Zach, if people want to learn more about you and what you do, what's the best way to get that information?
Yeah. So hit me on LinkedIn. You can search the hashtag Boom Shakalaka or Friday Toast and ZachMessler.com.
Excellent. All right. How do people get a hold of you?
I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. So I invite our audience, whether you're live with us today or watching this on a replay, to connect with me. Tell me where you saw me. Mention Bruce and Zach, and I will gladly accept your connection. I'm available to chat on LinkedIn, and my website is easy. It's 4 letters, ARIW.com. RIW.com. You can learn more about me there.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much. If people want to get a hold of me, just bruce@eckfeldt.com, email eckfeldt.com as URL, and obviously on LinkedIn. This was great. Again, to the audience, if anyone has any comments and questions, throw it onto the pages. We'll watch those in the coming days and weeks. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Bruce.
Boom Shakalaka.